Ravi walked alone on a quiet dirt road. The morning sun was rising slowly behind the hills and the sky was painted with soft orange light. Birds flew over the trees and the cool wind touched his face. His steps were slow and heavy, and his old shoes were covered in dust from many days of walking. His backpack carried only a few things: a water bottle, a blanket, and some bread. For many years he had lived as a traveler, moving from one place to another, crossing rivers, climbing mountains, and sleeping in the open under the stars. He was known as a poor hiker by the people he met. Some gave him food, some gave him directions, but he never stayed in one place for long. Yet today his journey had a destination. He was not wandering without purpose. He was walking toward a place he had once called home. It had been 30 long years since he had last seen it. 30 years since he had run away as a frightened boy in the middle of the night. His heart beat faster as he saw something familiar ahead. 2 tall iron gates standing in the distance, covered with wild vines and weeds. The gates were once proud and shining, with golden edges and a family crest carved in the middle. Now they were rusty and broken in many places. The crest was barely visible and the vines had almost hidden it completely. Ravi stopped in front of the gates and placed his hand on the cold metal. The chill ran through his skin and memories rushed back into his mind. He remembered running down this very path when he was young, his mother calling his name from the balcony, his father walking beside him with strong steps. He remembered the garden filled with roses and jasmine, the sound of laughter during family dinners and the glow of lamps in the evening. But he also remembered the fear, the whispers, and the night when everything changed. The mansion behind the gate stood tall and silent. Its walls, once white and shining, were now cracked and gray. The roof was broken in several places and many windows had no glass left. Some doors were hanging loose and black crows sat on the roof, staring down at him as if guarding the place. The garden had turned into a wild forest of weeds with thorns covering the stone path. Ravi pushed the gate gently. It gave a loud screech that echoed in the empty air. The sound made the crows fly up suddenly, their wings flapping in anger. Ravi took a deep breath and stepped inside. His heart was heavy, but his legs moved on their own. Each step on the broken stone path felt like walking back into another life. The grand front doors of the mansion were half open. The wooden panels were covered in scratches and the paint had peeled off. Ravi pushed them slowly. The doors creaked and dust fell from above. The air that came out was thick, old, and filled with the smell of damp wood. He stepped inside and stood still. The hall was large and dark. Long ago it had been bright with shining floors, red carpets, and servants moving with trays. Now the chandelier above was broken, hanging by one chain covered in cobwebs. The walls had long cracks and the wooden floor was filled with holes. Every step Ravi took made a loud echo that seemed to travel through the entire house. It felt like the house was alive, breathing in silence, watching his every move. Ravi explored the ground floor slowly. He entered the library where hundreds of books once stood neatly. Most of them were now torn, their pages yellow and scattered on the floor. Rats had chewed the edges and spiders had made their homes in the shelves. He touched one of the books gently and it crumbled in his hand. The dining hall was no better. The long table was still there, but the chairs were lying broken. Dust covered everything. In the corner of the room, Ravi saw something that made his heart ache. It was a small wooden horse, a child's toy. He remembered playing with it when he was young. He picked it up and held it tightly, feeling tears in his eyes. But no matter which room he entered, his attention always returned to one place: the locked door under the main staircase. It was a plain wooden door with an iron lock, but it had always been strange to him. Even as a boy, he had felt fear near that door. His father had warned him many times never to go near it. His mother had prayed in front of it once, whispering words he did not understand. And then there was the night when he had been told to run away. The night when loud noises came from the basement. The night his parents disappeared forever. Now, after 30 years, Ravi was standing in front of that very door. The lock was still there, but it was old and weak. He touched it gently, and it broke into pieces in his hand. The door creaked open slowly, and a wave of cold air rushed out. The smell was strange, like damp soil mixed with something rotten. Ravi felt his skin crawl, but he could not turn back. He lit a small lantern he carried. The flame shook as his hand trembled. Holding it high, he started walking down the narrow steps that led into the basement. Each step made a hollow sound. The deeper he went, the colder it became. Shadows danced on the stone walls. The silence grew heavier. At last he reached the bottom. He raised his lantern, and the light spread across the room. His eyes widened. This was not an ordinary basement. It looked more like a prison. Chains lay on the floor, broken and rusty, as if they had once held something down. The far wall was covered with strange symbols drawn in red, some of them still visible despite the years. In one corner stood an old wooden chair with deep scratch marks all around it, as if someone had tried to escape. Ravi's breath grew faster. His mind told him to leave, but his legs would not move. He stared at the chains, the symbols, the chair, and then he heard a sound. It was faint, soft but clear. The sound of breathing, and it was not his own. Ravi tightened his grip on the lantern. The light flickered and the shadows shifted. Somewhere in the dark corner of the basement, something was still alive. Ravi stood frozen at the bottom of the basement stairs. His lantern shook in his hand and the flame cast strange shadows on the stone walls. The sound of breathing filled the air. It was slow, heavy, and deep, as though something large was resting in the darkness. His own breath grew short and quick, and his heart beat loudly in his chest. He took a cautious step forward. The chains on the ground rattled softly under his shoe. The sound echoed through the basement, and the breathing stopped for a moment. Ravi froze. The silence was more frightening than the sound. He raised his lantern higher, trying to see into the far corners. Dust floated in the air, and the smell of damp earth grew stronger. "Is someone there?" Ravi whispered, his voice shaking. His words echoed against the stone walls. The breathing started again, slower this time, as if whatever was there had heard him and was answering with silence. Ravi swallowed hard and moved closer to the symbols on the far wall. He examined them carefully. They were drawn in red, faded but still clear. Circles, lines, and shapes that had no meaning to him. He touched the stone and it felt colder than ice. His fingers pulled back instantly. The chair in the corner drew his eyes next. It was old and cracked, with deep marks on the wood. The floor around it was scratched too, as if something had tried to claw its way out. Ravi's lantern flickered, and for a moment he thought he saw a shadow move. He spun around quickly, but the corner was empty. Still, the breathing continued. Ravi stepped back, his mind torn between leaving the basement forever or staying to uncover the truth. He had returned after 30 years for this reason. All his life he had wondered what his parents had tried to hide from him. All his nights on the road, all his wandering, he carried this mystery in his heart. Now he stood on the edge of that secret, afraid to take another step. He whispered again, louder this time. "Who is there?" For the first time the breathing changed. It grew faster, almost angry. A low growl came from the shadows. Ravi's lantern flame jumped, almost going out. He stumbled backward, his back pressing against the cold stone wall. His hand shook so badly that he nearly dropped the lantern. Suddenly he remembered his father's last words on that terrible night. His father had grabbed his arm tightly and shouted, "Run and never return. Do not look back." Ravi had listened then, but the memory now cut through him like a knife. He forced himself to breathe slowly. He raised his lantern again and took a step toward the sound. Each step echoed and the growl stopped. He reached the far corner where the darkness was thickest. He moved the lantern close. The light revealed an old wooden chest. Its lid was cracked and heavy chains wrapped around it. The chains were broken in many places, as though they had once been locked tightly, but had burst open with great force. The chest was empty now, only filled with dust. Ravi touched the edge of it and shivered. Whatever had been kept inside had escaped long ago. He turned his head sharply when he heard a new sound behind him. It was soft, like footsteps on the stone floor. His lantern lit the far end of the basement, and for just a moment he thought he saw something move past the wall. It was quick, like a shadow with no body. Fear gripped him, but curiosity pulled him forward. He walked toward the place where he had seen the movement. He found nothing but another wall, cracked and covered in moss. But when he placed his hand on it, he felt air coming through a small gap. There was another passage hidden behind the wall. Ravi pulled at the stones, and slowly they shifted. A narrow opening appeared, just enough for a man to pass through. Cold air rushed out from the darkness beyond, and it carried with it the faint sound of chains rattling. Ravi's skin prickled. He held his lantern tight and stepped through the gap. The hidden passage was narrow and long. The ceiling was low, forcing him to bend as he walked. The stone floor was damp and water dripped from above. The deeper he went, the stronger the smell became. It was the smell of decay, old and heavy. He covered his nose with his sleeve but kept moving. At last, the passage opened into a second chamber. This one was larger, with high walls and strange carvings etched into the stone. The carvings looked older than the mansion itself. Circles, symbols, and marks covered every surface. In the center of the room stood a large stone table, cracked but still standing. Around it were more chains, heavy and broken, and deep scratches in the stone floor. Ravi placed his lantern on the table and looked around. He could not understand what this room was. It did not look like a basement built for storage or wine. It looked more like a place of secrets, built for some purpose he could not imagine. He touched the carvings and his hand trembled. Then he heard the breathing again. This time it was closer, louder, coming from the shadows above. He raised his lantern quickly and looked around the chamber. His heart pounded when he saw two faint glimmers in the darkness, like eyes reflecting the light. The eyes blinked. Ravi stumbled backward, nearly falling over the chains. The lantern shook in his hand, throwing wild shadows across the walls. He could hear the thing moving, its breath heavy and rough. It was not the breath of a man, but something else, something deeper and older. He wanted to run, but his legs refused to move. His mind screamed at him to leave, yet his body was frozen in fear. The eyes moved again, sliding slowly across the darkness, always watching him. And then from the shadows came a voice. It was low, broken, and full of pain. "You came back." Ravi's heart stopped. The voice was not human, yet it spoke in words he could understand. He stepped back until his shoulders hit the wall. His hand shook and the lantern almost slipped from his fingers. The voice spoke again, louder this time. "After 30 years you came back." Ravi's breath caught in his throat. He wanted to answer, but no words came out. His mind was a storm of questions. Who was this? What was trapped here? Was this what had taken his parents away? The eyes glowed brighter in the dark. The sound of chains rattled once more. The voice spoke a third time, each word slow and heavy. "You should have stayed away." Ravi's lantern flickered, and for the first time he saw the outline of a figure moving in the shadows. Something had been waiting in the basement for 30 years, and now it knew he had returned. Ravi stood frozen, his back pressed against the cold wall of the secret chamber. The lantern in his hand shook, and the flame threw wild, shifting lights across the carvings on the stone. The glowing eyes in the darkness did not move away. They only blinked slowly, fixed on him. The rough, broken voice still echoed in his ears. "You should have stayed away." His throat felt dry, but he forced himself to speak. "Who are you? What are you?" The figure in the shadows shifted, and the sound of chains dragging across the floor filled the chamber. The eyes glowed brighter, and for a moment Ravi thought he saw a tall shape with long arms and a bent back. But the lantern light was too weak to show it clearly. "You know me," the voice answered, still low and full of pain. "You have always known. That is why your father locked the doors. That is why your mother prayed." Ravi's breath caught in his chest. His hands trembled, and the lantern flame wavered dangerously. He tried to remember every detail of his childhood, every warning his parents gave him. He remembered his father's strict command never to touch the basement door, his mother's frightened eyes whenever the subject was mentioned. But they never told him the truth. They never said what was hidden here. "I do not know you," Ravi whispered, though his heart was not sure. The voice answered with a sound that was half laugh, half growl. "You know my breath. You know my chains. You know my hunger." The words made Ravi step back until his shoulders pressed harder against the wall. The chains on the floor rattled as the figure moved closer. The lantern revealed more now. He saw a twisted arm with sharp nails dragging across the stone. He saw long marks on the floor where something powerful had once pulled itself forward. Ravi's legs screamed for him to run, but his mind held him still. He could not leave without knowing. He could not run again like he had 30 years ago. This secret had followed him all his life, and if he left now, it would haunt him forever. "What happened to my family?" Ravi asked in a trembling voice. "Where are they?" The glowing eyes blinked, and the voice replied slowly. "They gave me their strength. They gave me their lives to hold me here, but they could not last forever. Their blood is in the stones. Their cries are in the chains. They left you because you were small, because you were weak, because you were not ready." Ravi felt his heart ache. His knees nearly gave way. He understood now why his parents had sent him away. They had not abandoned him. They had sacrificed themselves to keep this creature locked in the basement. His throat burned as tears filled his eyes. He wanted to scream, but no sound came out. The figure moved again, and the chains rattled louder. The carvings on the walls seemed to glow faintly in the lantern light, as if the symbols themselves were alive. The voice spoke once more. "But now you are here. You returned, and so the chains will break." "No," Ravi said quickly, shaking his head. "I did not come to free you. I came for answers." "That is all." The eyes narrowed. The creature's growl shook the chamber. "It does not matter what you came for. The blood of your family is mine. Your return has woken me. The house remembers. The stones remember. And you cannot leave now." Ravi's breath came fast. He knew he was in danger, yet he could not let fear take him. He forced himself to look at the carvings on the wall again. The symbols were not random. They were patterns maybe meant to hold the creature down. He thought of his father. Maybe his father had carved them to keep the monster trapped. If that was true, perhaps there was still a way to stop it. Gathering his courage, Ravi stepped forward with the lantern. The creature hissed from the shadows and its glowing eyes burned brighter. But Ravi kept his voice steady. "If you want me, you will have to face the light." He lifted the lantern high and moved closer to the figure. At first it stayed back, the shadows hiding its body, but when the lantern light touched its face, Ravi gasped. The creature was tall, with skin that looked like cracked stone. Its mouth was wide with sharp teeth and its eyes glowed like fire. Chains hung from its arms and legs, some broken, some still clinging to its body. Its face was not fully beast, yet not human either. It was something in between, twisted and ancient. The sight filled Ravi with horror, but also with strange understanding. This was the thing his family had lived with. This was the prisoner of the basement. "You see me now," the creature said with a dark smile. "You see what your blood has held. For 30 years I waited. Now you stand before me." Ravi's heart pounded, but he tightened his grip on the lantern. "You will not take me," he said, his voice shaking but strong. The creature laughed, and the sound echoed like thunder through the chamber. The walls shook and dust fell from the ceiling. "You think you can resist? You think you are stronger than those who came before you? Your father tried. Your mother tried. They failed, and you will fail too." Ravi's mind raced. He knew he was no warrior, no priest, no hero. He was only a poor hiker, a man who had spent years wandering without purpose. But perhaps his wandering had been for this very moment. Perhaps he had survived so long because fate wanted him to return here and face what others could not. His eyes moved across the carvings again, and he realized something. Some of the symbols were broken. Time had worn them away, leaving gaps. Perhaps that was why the creature's chains were loose. Perhaps that was why it had grown stronger. If he could restore the carvings, maybe the chains would hold again. "I am not here to free you," Ravi said, louder now. "I am here to finish what my family started." The creature roared in anger, rushing forward. Its chains scraped loudly across the floor, sparks flying. Ravi stumbled back, but he held the lantern high. The flame glowed brighter, reflecting on the carvings. For a brief moment, the creature stopped, growling as if the light itself hurt it. Ravi realized the lantern flame was his only weapon for now. He lifted it higher and shouted with all the strength in his lungs. "You will not have me. Not now, not ever." The chamber shook again as the creature roared louder. Its claws reached forward, its chains rattling like thunder. Ravi backed against the wall, his lantern trembling in his hand. The eyes burned brighter. The voice rose in fury. "Then you will die here as they did." Ravi's heart raced. His choice was clear. He could run back through the narrow passage and escape, or he could stand and fight to seal the creature once more. He tightened his grip on the lantern and made his decision. Ravi stood with the lantern raised high, the small flame fighting against the darkness of the hidden chamber. The creature's eyes glowed brighter, and its chains rattled like heavy thunder across the stone floor. Its twisted body shifted forward, each step echoing with power. The carvings on the walls trembled faintly as if the house itself was alive and reacting to the struggle between man and beast. Ravi's chest rose and fell quickly, but his mind was no longer filled with only fear. A new strength burned inside him. He thought of his parents, of their sacrifice 30 years ago. They had given their lives to keep this monster sealed. They had sent him away not because he was weak, but because they hoped he would live and perhaps return one day when the time was right. Now the time had come. "You will not leave this place," Ravi said firmly, though his voice shook under the weight of fear. "I will not let you." The creature laughed, a deep, terrible sound that filled the chamber like rolling thunder. "You are a wanderer with no power. You are nothing. Do you think you can stop me with a flame? Ravi looked at the carvings again. Some were glowing faintly, but many were broken or faded. He realized that the flame of his lantern was awakening them. Light had power here. The symbols had been carved not just as marks, but as seals that responded to fire and faith. He gripped the lantern tighter and moved closer to the nearest broken symbol. He lifted the flame to it, and the lines began to glow slowly, as if the stone remembered the old fire from long ago. The creature roared, shaking its chains in anger. "No!" it shouted, its voice shaking the ground. "Do not touch the seals. They are my prison." Ravi did not stop. He pressed the lantern flame close to the carvings, and one by one they began to awaken. The chamber glowed faintly with light, chasing the shadows away. The creature hissed and stepped back, its eyes burning brighter but its body recoiling as though in pain. Ravi felt courage grow inside him. He moved quickly along the walls, raising the flame to every faded carving he could see. The air grew warmer, the glow brighter. The chains around the creature rattled harder, pulling at its body. The beast roared again, shaking the chamber so strongly that dust and small stones fell from the ceiling. "You cannot bind me again," it growled. "I have tasted freedom. I have waited too long." Ravi ignored its words. He moved to the far side of the room, holding the flame to another symbol. But as he did, the lantern flickered. His heart froze. The flame was growing weak. He had used too much oil already on his journey. The light would not last long. The creature saw this weakness and laughed cruelly. "Your fire is dying. Soon the dark will return and you will be mine." Ravi's eyes darted around the chamber. He searched for anything he could use. Then he saw something at the far end of the room. It was an old stand with a stone bowl on top. Inside the bowl lay ashes, and above it hung a piece of metal shaped like a small torch holder. He realized this had once been the fire pit his father used to keep the seals alive. The ashes were cold now, but perhaps if he lit them again, the room would burn with true light. He ran toward it, but the creature roared and leaped forward. The chains dragged across the floor, sparks flying. Its claws slashed the air, missing Ravi by inches. He stumbled but kept moving. He reached the stone bowl and poured the last drops of oil from his lantern into it. Then, with trembling hands, he lowered the flame. The fire caught slowly at first, then grew stronger, as if the chamber itself wanted to live again. Bright orange flames rose high, and the carvings on the walls glowed with power. The entire room lit up, and the darkness was pushed back. The creature screamed in pain. Its body shook, and the chains tightened around its arms and legs. The seals glowed brighter, pulling at it, binding it. But still it fought, pulling so hard that the stone table cracked and the ground split in places. Ravi stood before the fire, sweat dripping down his face, and shouted with all his strength. "You will stay here forever. My family gave their lives to bind you, and I will finish their work." The fire roared louder as if answering his cry. The carvings burned with golden light. The chains clamped down harder. The creature howled, its glowing eyes burning like fireballs. "You cannot hold me," it screamed. "If you bind me again, your blood will feed the seals. You will not leave this chamber alive." Ravi's heart shook at those words. He knew the beast was not lying. To complete the binding, a price would be paid. His parents had given their lives 30 years ago. Now the fire demanded the same from him. He closed his eyes for a moment and thought about his life. He had wandered across the world with no home, no peace, no rest. He had carried the burden of this mystery since childhood. Perhaps this was the purpose of his journey. Perhaps his life was meant to end here so others would never face this monster again. He opened his eyes, firm and calm. "If my blood is needed, then take it. But you will never leave this place," the creature roared in fury and charged. Ravi lifted the torch from the fire bowl and held it high. The flames wrapped around the metal, burning brightly. He ran toward the nearest wall and pressed the torch to the largest broken carving. The stone glowed with blinding light. The creature screamed louder as chains shot out from the walls and wrapped around its arms. Ravi moved quickly to the other side, pressing the torch to another symbol. More chains leaped out, binding the beast's legs. The fire grew stronger and the chamber shook violently. Stones fell from the ceiling and the ground cracked beneath them. The monster pulled with all its strength, but the chains did not break. It roared so loud the air itself seemed to tremble. Ravi pressed the torch to the final seal at the far end of the chamber. The walls glowed with a golden blaze and all the chains tightened at once. The creature fell to its knees, bound completely. Its glowing eyes dimmed, but its voice still carried rage. "If you finish this, you will not live. You will join your parents in the stones." Ravi held the torch high, his face pale but firm. He stepped closer to the fire bowl in the center. He knew the creature was right. To seal it forever, he had to give the final offering. His life would end here. He whispered softly, not to the monster but to his parents. I understand now. I'm not afraid. I will finish what you began. With steady hands, he raised the torch above the fire. The flames leaped high. The carvings glowed brighter and the chamber filled with light so powerful it blinded his eyes. The beast screamed one last time, a sound that shook the entire mansion above. Ravi felt the heat of the fire surround him. His body trembled, but his spirit stood strong. He knew this was the end, but also the victory his family had waited for. And then the light swallowed everything. Ravi stood in the middle of the grand hall with his lantern raised high. His heart beat loudly in his chest. He had faced the shadows in the basement, the strange whispers and the old memories that returned to him after 30 years. The mansion was not only a home of his childhood, but also a place of hidden darkness. He knew he had to uncover the last secret if he wished to be free from the heavy weight that followed him since he left as a boy. The mansion seemed alive around him. The walls creaked, the broken windows rattled with the wind, and the long curtains moved like they were breathing. Ravi looked up at the broken chandelier hanging above. It swayed gently, though the air was still. He knew that something was still unfinished. Something in the house was waiting for him. He walked back to the stairs. His lantern light made long shadows run across the hall. At the top of the stairs was a narrow hallway that led to the rooms his family once used. He had avoided that place since he returned. The basement had pulled him first, but now the upper floor called to him. He climbed slowly, each step echoing in the silence. The first room he entered was his father's study. The desk was still in place, though covered in dust. Old papers were spread on it. Ravi picked one and tried to read. The letters were faded but clear enough to make out. They spoke about the mansion's history, about secrets hidden in its foundation. His father had written that the land was not ordinary land. It was said to be cursed long before the mansion was built. Strange figures were seen in the forest. Strange voices were heard underground. His father had tried to study these things in secret. He had written notes about the basement, about the chains and symbols, and about something he called the Keeper. Ravi's hand shook as he held the paper. So his father had known. He had known that something dark lived beneath their home. He had tried to understand it, maybe even stop it, but he had failed. He placed the paper back and looked around the room. On the shelf he found an old key. It was large and heavy, made of iron. He remembered his father keeping such a key hidden from the servants. He had once asked about it, but his father only said, "One day you may need it." Now he held it in his hand. He felt sure it belonged to something important. He left the study and walked down the hall to his mother's room. It was smaller and still carried a faint smell of flowers, though the air was stale. On her dressing table, Ravi saw a small wooden box. He opened it and found a letter. The paper was thin and yellow with age. It was addressed to him. His heart stopped for a moment as he unfolded it. "My dear son," it read, "if you ever return, know that your father and I loved you more than anything. We kept many secrets from you because we wanted to protect you. The basement holds something that cannot be allowed to escape. We gave our lives to keep it locked. If you are reading this, then you are the last of us. Do not fear the shadows. Face them and you will find the truth. Only then will the house release you." Ravi sat on the dusty floor holding the letter. His eyes burned, but no tears came. His parents had not abandoned him. They had sacrificed themselves. They had fought the darkness, and now it was his turn. With the letter in one hand and the key in the other, Ravi rose to his feet. He knew where he had to go. Back to the basement. The mansion groaned as he walked down the stairs again. The cold air grew heavier. He reached the basement door and pushed it open. The lantern light shone on the walls where strange symbols were carved. He stepped inside. The breathing sound returned. It was faint but clear. Ravi followed it to the far wall where he had seen the symbols before. Now he noticed a hidden line in the stone, a door. The heavy key in his hand seemed to fit. He pushed it into a rusted lock that was half hidden in the wall. With a loud click, the stone door began to slide open. Behind it was a narrow passage. The air was colder than ice. He stepped inside carefully. The floor was wet and his lantern flickered. The passage led to a small chamber deep under the house. In the center of the chamber was a stone altar. Around it were broken chains and old markings. Ravi felt a strange pressure on his chest, as if the air itself was pushing against him. Then he saw it. In the shadows of the chamber stood a figure. It was tall and thin, its body almost like smoke, but its eyes glowed faintly. The figure did not move closer, but spoke in a whisper that filled the room. "You have returned," it said. "Your family tried to bind me. They failed. Now you come to finish what they could not." Ravi's knees felt weak, but he stood tall. He held up the lantern and the letter. His voice was steady, though his heart raced. "My parents gave their lives to keep you locked. I will not run. I will not let you stay free." The figure laughed, a sound like wind through broken glass. "You are only a man. How will you fight me?" Ravi looked around and saw the symbols on the floor. They were faded, broken with time. He remembered his father's notes. The symbols were meant to hold the shadow. He knelt quickly and used a piece of broken stone to carve them again, stronger and deeper. As he worked, the figure grew restless, moving from side to side like smoke caught in wind. "You cannot bind me again," it hissed. But Ravi kept working. He cut his hand on the sharp stone and let his blood fall into the lines of the symbols. The carvings glowed faintly, the chamber shaking as if the earth itself was alive. The shadow screamed and tried to rush at him, but the glowing symbols rose like a wall of fire. The figure twisted, its glowing eyes fading, its voice breaking into silence. With one last cry, it vanished into the darkness, leaving the chamber quiet. Ravi fell to his knees, breathing heavily. The lantern burned steadily again, and the cold air slowly lifted. The mansion above seemed to sigh as though it had been freed from a long curse. He stood and looked at the glowing symbols. His parents had given him the chance to finish what they began. He whispered softly, "It is done." When he left the chamber and closed the stone door, he felt lighter. The mansion no longer groaned. The shadows no longer whispered. He walked out into the morning light, the gates opening behind him without force. Ravi looked back one last time at the old house. It was no longer a place of fear, but a place of memory. His family's story was complete. He had faced the basement, faced the shadow, and brought peace at last. He turned away from the mansion with the sun rising on the road ahead. For the first time in 30 years, his heart was free.